here believes you have at least one great story inside you? I believe you all do. And I'd like you to consider, as you listen to this talk, what your great story is. In 2005, I quit my job as a litigation attorney, and I started a business. And that business failed miserably. I'd had failures before, but this one hit me at my core, and it undermined everything good that I'd held true about myself. I felt irreparably crushed until I found myself volunteering at a race called Silverman. Silverman was a triathlon, and I didn't know anything about triathlon. All I knew was that the athletes at Silverman swam 2.4 miles, biked 112 miles, and ran 26.2 miles, 140.6 total. A friend had encouraged me to volunteer, and I thought, what the heck? Let's see what kind of nut jobs sign up for a race like this. My volunteer post was on a cold, dark portion of the run course. And as I watched the athletes run by, the mean, nasty monologue that had become a part of my existence got louder. And it said, why don't I have this kind of dedication? Why don't I have this kind of drive? Why don't I have this kind of discipline? Because these athletes look like normal people, because of course they were normal people, that just served to compound the sense of self-loathing that I had. Anyone who's felt even half of what I felt that night knows how painful and debilitating it is. Which is why I'm forever grateful for what happened next. The mean, nasty voice in my head wouldn't stop, and it had risen to a fever pitch. It was so loud, almost like a high-pitched screaming whine in my head, until a different voice intervened. And that voice said, do this race, do the half. Silverman also offered a half iron distance, which is only 70.3 miles. And to this day, I'm grateful that the voice told me to do the half. I was not an athlete, and I started in a horrendous headspace. And because of that, it took me 2 years to get to the Silverman start line. For the first year of training, I couldn't finish a race to save my life until I had the courage to find a coach who could help me finally deal with this. Working with her changed everything. In the weeks leading up to Silverman, I felt confident for the first time in what felt like forever. Part of that was all the work that I had put in over 2 years of training. But another part was that Silverman had taken on such deep meaning for me that in those last few weeks before race day, it felt like an unseen force was pulling me forward. Little did I know just how much that deep meaning and unseen force would come into play on race day. Some of the best stories pull you right in, don't they? You think you know what the story's about, but you don't always. On November 9th, 2008, my husband drove me to the race start. He had witnessed me remodel my body, mind, and spirit through sport. And now he was here to witness the finish, the triumph. 10 miles into the 56-mile bike course came the first clue that this day would not go as planned. A flat tire. Don't help me. We're not supposed to accept outside help. I got this, I said, as he pulled over to see if I was okay. I let my husband help the second time the tire flatted because we were well into unknown territory. I hadn't had one flat in the prior 6 months, let alone 2 in a row, and I had no more inner tubes. I only ever carried 2. When was the last time something you poured your heart and soul into went horribly awry? The third flat happened a few miles later with no one around. Having no other option, I walked my bike forward through the desert. A woman stopped her car and offered to give me a ride. I can't accept a ride. I'll be disqualified. She gave me a puzzled look and drove on. What if I don't make it? I asked when Glenn found me again. As he patched the punctured tube and inspected the rim, he said, "You'll make it if we have to change a dozen tires." As I rode away that third time, I started to cry. And then the tears dissolved as quickly as they had come, and it happened. Time seemed to slow down as the magnitude of everything that Silverman meant to me crystallized down into one single moment, until that moment was all there was. I kept riding until a few miles later, the tire went flat for the 4th time. When was the last time you knew that what happened before and what was going to happen next were much less important than what was happening in that moment? That is the core of your great story, and you must tell it. Stories have been around for thousands of years, and if they didn't work as a channel for human connection, they would have died out long ago. John Steinbeck put it aptly when he said, "If a story is not about the hearer, he will not listen. A great and interesting story is about everyone, or it will not last." Think about the last time that you experienced a moment where you knew that nothing in the world mattered more than what was going on in that moment. You were likely able to do that because whatever was happening had some meaning for you. It carried some urgency with it. Whether the urgency was good or bad doesn't matter. What matters is that you felt it. During the bike portion of Silverman, I knew something special was going on. At the same time that everything was falling apart on the bike course, something bigger was coming together. That race meant everything to me. Through that race, I learned that no matter how badly that prior failure had crushed my spirit, I was on the cusp of something else I could do, someone else I could be. And because of what happened at Silverman, my work now revolves around my gifts for writing, for speaking, for telling relevant stories. If a story is not about the hearer, he will not listen. It's not just John Steinbeck and I who believe that. Science is proving it. In 2010, neuroscientists from Princeton University studied what happens in the brains of storytellers and listeners. And what they found was that there was matching activity in widespread areas of the brain, and that the listener's brain activity actually mirrored the speaker's. So the researchers were able to predict the effectiveness of a piece of communication just by measuring the extent of this coupling in the speaker and listener brains. So it's not just any story you should tell. It's the relevant stories you must tell. When you discern that feeling you get inside those moments where something is on the line, where you're forced to step up, that's a sign that your story is relevant. But discernment alone is not enough. To tell a relevant story, you must have empathy. A great and interesting story is about everyone, or it will not last. A story cannot be about everyone and lack in empathy. Can someone else see herself inside of your story? That's it. That's empathy. That's when you know your story is bigger than you, and you must tell it. After the fourth flat, the wind picked up and it started to rain. I'd never ridden in rain before, but at this point, I was glad to still be in the race. A portion of the Silverman bike course was on the River Mountain Loop Trail, miles of narrow, slick asphalt trail with no vehicular access. A flat here would end my race, but I didn't think about that. On that day, the mean inner monologue that had lived with me for so long was silenced. Emerging from the River Mountain Loop Trail with less than 10 miles to go, that's when the fifth flat happened. I had no idea where my husband was, no way to contact him. Until walking my bike forward through the streets of Henderson, I saw a race volunteer and asked if I could use her phone. That was the only time I thought about quitting. Until I heard the roar of the engine and the screeching of tires as Glenn got out of the truck, grabbed that bike, and fixed the tire for the fifth and final time. I made it to transition, and I prepared to run 13.1 miles. Every step of that run was a triumph. For 10 hours, 48 minutes, 33 seconds, I lived inside those moments, pulled forward by a goal that meant more to me than I could have ever imagined. And crossing that finish line was just the beginning of what I could do, of who I could be. Now, I still had the same fears, quirks, and foibles after Silverman as before. But the difference was, when I decided I really did want my own business, nothing was going to stop me. I wanted to write for a living, making real money, using my natural gift of language and natural sense of empathy. I got clients, and I built a writing business. I wanted to speak on stage. I applied for TEDx and was denied. I applied again, and here it is. trust yourselves to live inside those moments when you need to. So some of you may be saying, Steph, this is great, this is amazing, but I've never done anything like Silverman, and I don't really want to. So the beauty that is the magic of relevant stories is that the stories don't have to be your own. You can borrow a story from people in your lives, from talks like this today, or from fiction. The Journal of Brain Connectivity has published research showing lingering neural effects from reading fiction. So if you are deeply moved by someone else's story, that's a relevant story for you. I want you to take your experiences and ideas, discern how they are relevant, and share them. I want your relevant stories to help someone experience a shift in thinking, in action, in impact. And I want you to show your friends, family, coworkers, clients, what's possible for them. You all have at least one great story to share. Your call is to share it. Thank you.